Welcome back.
Welcome back. We literally had to do a second try because I was burping and fucking gassing into the fucking microphone.
Fucking gaseous glay over here.
Who?
Gaseous glay.
Gaseous glay?
Yeah.
So Muhammad Ali dies and you decide to make a pun out of his name.
Many years later.
Not many years. He only died 2 years ago.
Many.
It wasn't 2 years ago. How many years ago was it? It was like 2010, wasn't it?
It was a while.
Yeah, all right. Doesn't matter. Welcome back to Brembury Leak.
Where we leak memories.
Where we leak gas into the fucking microphone.
We leak memories and more.
Yeah, memories and more. That's what we'll call it. All right, fuck it. We are
a podcast.
No, names. Give me names.
Benjamin Seltzerwater to Benjamin.
And I'm Geron Setzerwater. Geron. All right.
Come on, man. You can do better than that.
You mean?
It's all right.
You said, we're bringing up the fucking games. May as well. Setzer is in the fucking.
All right. So they recently.
Who's they?
The world was blessed. No, let's take a step back. Not a lot has been happening recently.
Not a lot,
to be honest.
That is relevant to this particular podcast. That is correct.
Not a lot in the gaming world.
Yeah.
I would say the world is finally giving us a chance to catch up on all the games.
Yeah, that's
It's been a crazy year.
Yeah.
It's been a crazy 12 months to think of all the things that have come out.
Yeah. We're talking like 2023 to now.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of juices flowing for the people, for the consumers, but then a lot of bullshit for the developers that are working on these games. I'm not talking about the publishers specifically. I'm talking about the developers that are losing their jobs to random bullshit because industry is not completely sustainable.
No, none of them
are.
Not
the way it is. But that's not really what we're talking about right now. What we are talking about is
we just had the 30th anniversary. The world just had the 30th anniversary. The world celebrated.
The world celebrated.
The 30th
worldwide.
anniversary.
Everyone celebrated it.
Everyone danced through the streets, cheering, throwing their clothes in the air and confetti.
Putting their heel through their Super Nintendo.
Making love, not war.
Making war, not
what?
Whatever. What's it called? Final Fantasy
VI changed the face of JRPGs forever.
For most people. For some people.
The bar wasn't that crazy. It was a little crazy because Chrono Trigger was already out.
I mean, and it also didn't come out everywhere, so.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Oops.
Final Fantasy III, for those that are old enough to remember it coming out on the Super Nintendo.
In the US, specifically. Because that shit didn't come out in Europe.
Ever?
I don't think it came out in Europe. I think the first game they got was Final Fantasy VII.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah. Give it a look real quick. Because remember Nintendo... You don't remember. You weren't like cognizant of it. But Nintendo of America was dealing with Final Fantasy over here.
Yeah.
Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest, ironically. And they didn't really have anything to do with each other at that point.
That's interesting. Yeah, the first release of the first Final Fantasy was on the PlayStation version.
Yeah.
Which was, I guess it was PS Origins at that time. Mm-hmm. In 2003. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Final Fantasy Origins. That was the first PAL release for 1 and 2. Original 3, they got the DS version.
Yeah.
They got the what was it called on for Final Fantasy 4?
2 was 4. 4 was 2 here.
Right, but there was a PlayStation version. It's called Anthology, I think.
Yeah.
Final Fantasy Anthology.
The one.
It was 4 and Chrono Trigger.
4 and Chrono Trigger.
Yeah. It was weird.
That may have been it.
And then, but there's also 5 that came out.
Yeah.
The Final Fantasy 5 was on Final Fantasy Anthology. What am I thinking of here?
There's Chronicle and Anthology. I think
that's Chronicle right. Chronicles was 4.
I think Chronicle might have been 5 and Chrono Trigger.
5 and 6. 4 was definitely with Chrono Trigger.
4 was with Chrono Trigger. All right. Then 5 and 6 must have been Anthology and Fuck off. Couldn't they just call them Volume 1?
Chronicles was 4 and Chrono Trigger, and it added the CGI cutscenes. To 4.
Yeah, to 4. Okay, there you go.
It added the animated cutscenes to Chrono Trigger.
Chrono Trigger, which were also included with the DS version without load times.
But Chrono Trigger was on a compilation for the PlayStation 1 with shitty disc load times called Final Fantasy Chronicles. Yeah. Not to be confused with Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles.
Yeah, which is a completely different fucking game of its own. Cool game, good game. I could play some of the music on my ocarina, but
Final Fantasy Anthology was 5 and 6.
So it was 5 and 6 that was together. Okay.
Which is kind of cool because that means that pretty much every game except for 3, 1 through 6, they had already basically started the re-releasing cycle, which was cool because they were making things available on modern hardware and in regions that it had never been available at the time.
And you could actually buy those games from Square Enix for years. I think
on their online store?
Yeah, I think only very, very, very recently did they stop printing them. And if I remember right, the CDs they were printing them on no longer had the black.
Yeah,
they weren't black. They had. I was about to say blackface. Holy shit. Oh boy. The CD backs were not black. They were just.
Wouldn't really be
CDs.
Technically incorrect though.
I mean, it wouldn't be incorrect.
That face of the disc.
Sure, but it's not called blackface. So don't say it.
Oh God.
But yeah, no. Final Fantasy has been ubiquitous, and Final Fantasy VI is the first one that I remember vividly because my friend's brother was playing it at
Super Nintendo.
On the Super Nintendo, as Final Fantasy III. So that was the music that I remember. The ending fanfare of battles and shit like that. The intro. That was what Final Fantasy was to me at the time. Yeah. And so. And I thought Terra was scary.
Terra is kind of scary.
Yeah, Terra is scary, but I thought she was like really scary. I thought the things happening to her were terrifying.
They are. So, that game is darker than
is terrifying in its own
than any of the others. I would say to that point, it was darker, more almost like human of a story, more human of like the pain that they go through. I was going to say
that was the first one that I think decided to say fuck it. These people are going to lose a lot.
Yeah.
Like lose, physically lose things, emotionally lose things. One of them tries to end it all if you don't do something right. So.
I don't remember that.
You don't remember? Which
character?
When
Is this in the World of Ruin?
This is going to be full of spoilers. It was like at the beginning of the World of Ruin, yeah.
Oh, okay. I've been replaying it, and I was trying to remember some of the story beats, and I hadn't remembered the details of some of these things.
Oh,
I think part of it is the fact that it's all pixel art. Like, all right, so let's hold on. Let's take a step back.
Okay.
So Final Fantasy VI released in a number of different ways. It released first on the Super Nintendo, in Japan as Final Fantasy VI, in the US as Final Fantasy III because it was the third Final Fantasy to come out here.
Yeah.
And then it released as Final Fantasy VI again as a compilation in Europe.
Yeah.
Don't play it on the PlayStation version.
Don't play any of them on the PlayStation
Definitely
version if you can avoid
the
it.
roughest set of like re-releases, given it was the first one and it was all disc-based, going from something that was cartridge-based, so it had no load times.
Yeah.
So I actually have played through all those PlayStation 1 compilations because I was a child that had too much time, and I just sat through it and dealt with it.
Fucking blew through. I mean, when you're a kid, you're just happy to have the fucking game in the first place. So.
It's like what we was talking about last time with Princess Peach. It's like you have the time.
Yeah.
You have the patience to sit through things over and over again.
Yeah.
I'd be curious if kids these days have the same amount of patience.
I think kids these days actually have more patience for that than
we give them credit for.
I think what they have less patience for is actually narratives. I think they prefer to just get game, which is why multiplayer games, like free-to-play multiplayer games, seem to be so popular.
Yeah.
Because there's less talking, more playing.
Yeah.
And these kids want to play. You know what I mean?
Makes sense. Yeah.
And
give me the toy, let me play with the toy.
Yeah. Our arcade style philosophy kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, but that's not what we're talking about.
No. So, and then in my opinion, one of the best versions was the Game Boy Advance version that came out after that.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Which added additional content. It added additional dungeons at the end.
Yeah.
It added what?
Keep going.
It added espers and summons that weren't in the original version.
In the original one. You know what else it added?
What?
The most fucked up version of all the music in
the game that's true of every single game GBA port, unfortunately.
The GBA version of
pretty
rough to play with the music.
Pretty much every GBA game that got a port from another system also nowadays has a subsequent mod to replace the music with the original music.
Sounds like the original, yeah.
The Super Nintendo music is some of the most iconic, well-designed for its chipset music of all time.
Personally, I think the music... Personally, I prefer the... Personally, I think Final Fantasy VI's music on the Super Nintendo sounds better than Final Fantasy VII's music does on the PlayStation.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I think...
Because Nobuo had fucking years to deal with 4, 5, 6, Chrono Trigger to a degree.
Yeah.
Like, he had experience. He knew exactly how to get the sound that he wanted.
Right.
7, he'd only had like a couple years, and it was a completely different way of developing music. It's probably a completely different music engine that he had to work with.
Which is crazy when you think about it, because the sound chip in the Super Nintendo was made by Sony. The PlayStation is also a Sony product. You would think you'd be able to port the same kind of You would think you'd be able to port the same kind of sounds over, especially because Final Fantasy VII uses all MIDI, which kind of hit me like a bus, because I was like, this game is on three CDs. They should have just kind of went off and had a little bit more of, Sephiroth theme lyrics interspersed more with the game, but at the same time they were just trying to figure out what the fuck to do with that thing in the first place.
I mean, the same thing could be said for the graphics. Look at the graphical change from 7 to 8 in 1 year.
Yeah,
right?
We talked about that. Yeah, exactly.
It's the same of the music. The music of 8 is a lot more like orchestral sounding. Like it's fuller. So I think it was just the transition period, which is reasonable. It's also still crazy how 7 has some of the most iconic music of any of the games.
Yeah, 7 has good melodies. I think some of those are damaged, just a little bit damaged. You know what I mean? Some of them are not what they could be because of the MIDI instruments they went with a lot of them. Though Final Fantasy Remake and Rebirth, I assume, kind of fixes some of that shit. Like, you can use that.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
So going back to 6, some of the other things that 6 did differently and innovatively, more innovatively, more interesting.
Way, I don't know.
And 6 is brilliant for a few reasons. Yeah. And I'm going to break it down for you.
Break it down.
First off, the way that the story is told and the way that the characters are developed, it's probably one of, if still not the only true ensemble story that I've seen in an RPG. There's no true protagonist.
Everyone is the main character. The situation is the main.
If you were to ask somebody who the main character is, of course people say Terra. But the reason that they say Terra is because Terra is the first character you play as.
Yeah, Terra is what you think would be.
Terra's not the main character of the game. If anything, Locke is closer to being the main character of the game.
And even then, when you're playing the game, it doesn't feel that way.
No, it doesn't.
Until a certain point.
Part of it I think is weirdly because it's like the way that POV is done is not really written in a way that POV is done in other games.
Yeah.
Which is to say, in Super Nintendo, a lot of times there would be a silent protagonist, or there would be long stretches where you'd only have the character.
Yeah.
Final Fantasy IV, you do the whole thing with Cecil becoming a paladin. Yeah. So there's a lot of that kind of it's a spoiler. It's 3 hours into the game. So there's a lot of stretches where it focuses on one character's interaction with all of the other characters, but in 6 it's the whole web is what it focuses on. There's things where one character will be interacting with other characters, then you won't see any of them for a large stretch of the game, and it'll be a completely different set of characters. And then they'll completely mix it up again and they'll say, oh, these characters are no longer interacting. We're going to throw them over here, these people back over here, and see how they interact and get together.
It's difficult to make a determination of who's the leader at most points too.
Yeah.
Because that shifts, that who you think is that shifts depending on what's going on in the game. And then, you get to that halfway point, World of Ruin, and everybody's separated.
Yeah. And that's another, the World of Ruin is interesting because that's also where it becomes even more obvious that Terra's not really the main character of this game. Terra, spoiler alert, doesn't want to even really be in the game anymore. Talks about not wanting to be involved anymore. Yeah. And it actually feels kind of bad when you optionally pull her back into the party
to do,
because her story is resolved basically.
Yeah. And you can just leave everybody alone. You'll have a hard time, but you can leave almost everybody alone.
Yeah.
At that point of the game.
But going back to the beginning. So from the sound design to the character design to the narrative to the story to the combat, it's all just very, very innovative compared to how all the other RPGs are done, which is that characters don't have set spells, characters don't have set classes. They did that with Final Fantasy V, but with Final Fantasy V, you only have 4 characters, and I would say the narrative is fairly weak in Final Fantasy V.
Yeah, I mean,
it's kind of nothing. 5 is really just the gameplay.
A lot of them are, yeah. I think 6 was by the time 6 was a thing, they were like, okay, we need to narrative and gameplay fully. Like 4 has that, but it's also very simple in comparison.
6 is the full package, and it does it with a cast of like, it's got to be, it's over 10. It's like 12. It's over 10 characters for sure.
I'm thinking of the 4 groups of the 3 groups that you use to split up, and I'm like, that's
early in the game too. That you get 3 groups to split across. It's like 8 characters split across 3 groups to protect Bannon. In the first segment that you do that, but you do a lot of that kind of thing where you split the group into subgroups, and you have to manage between them.
And that shit is cool as fuck because they don't give you a right answer.
Right,
you have to be like, which combination is going to be my weak link.
Yeah, and
like,
they don't really have archetypes.
Yeah.
They don't have archetypes really at all. I mean, they do have a character that says monk in his title. Yeah. They have a character that says, machinist in his title, but you can still build them however you want. And that's because of the summon and the Esper system.
The Espers,
It changes their stats as they level up. It changes the spells that they get access to.
If you have patience, you can use that to break shit.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, the game is meant to be broken, which is also kind of cool. It's part of what makes JRPGs fun in my mind. It's like that whole theory crafting, end game crafting.
We were talking about what makes a lot of those games fun is the preparation.
Yeah.
You're rewarded for over preparing by being able to steamroll everything. Whether you enjoy the lack of challenge after that or not is up to you, because sometimes the challenge is getting all the pieces together.
That's right.
You can do that in the first place.
Yeah, it's a scale where it's a preparation execution scale.
Yeah,
where you can balance as much as you want. If you want to index entirely into the preparation and grinding and getting every spell, you can do that, which then requires 0 execution.
Exactly.
Or you can just kind of play through the game with minimal preparation, just kind of play through whatever random battles that you come across,
come your way,
or with the pixel remasters, turn encounters off entirely and just kind of play through it as much as you want, and then focus entirely on the execution, maximizing your item usage and your character usage and your build composition and the knowledge that you've gained probably from playing this game in your past or whatever.
Like when I played it on Super Nintendo, I just nuked that guy gave everybody fucking Ultima ass nuke.
Yeah,
and just
went through it.
The shit out of the end game. I was like, okay.
But the other thing that really just impressed me about the game is every character is not as much of a blank slate as it might seem with what we're talking about with the Espers. So you can give anybody any summon and build them however you want.
Yeah.
Every character also has their own innate set of abilities that all work differently.
Yeah.
They have a character
completely differently.
They have a character that you input fighting game commands and he does a different move. They have a character who has different items that then turn into certain things and certain effects that they can use. They have a character who has a samurai meter, and the meter builds up, and it takes longer if you want to use a higher tier samurai skill. It's like he's preparing his stance.
Yeah. You have fucking Gao who needs to pick up all of his moves from the enemies in the game. And
it's the blue mage character, but the way he works is even a little bit unique, where he jumps into the enemy mob and you lose him from your party until you fight another mob and he comes back and he remembers who you are.
Yeah.
So even the way that they implement some of the archetypal characters is in their own right unique.
Yeah. Yeah. Like the way the characters work in 6 is unique. And if you did them again, it would feel wouldn't feel the same, because there's something built into them in 6.
And then just the characters' backstories is some of them are very, very dark and tragic. Yeah. Like the samurai guy I mentioned, his wife and child are poisoned to death.
Kefka poisons the fucking water.
Yeah, and you see the dead fucking wife and child, and he pulls them out of the bed, and he sees them embarking on a train into the afterlife.
Yeah.
Wild shit. I just did not, it didn't really register with me the impact of it until I saw it again. And I was thinking about what it would be like in an FF7 remake style. I was like, this would be intense to see and fully acted out and fully voiced.
If they were to remake the game, the only way I'd accept it is a 2D HD.
Yeah.
I would not accept voice acting. Half of what makes that story the way it is for me is reading it. So.
Yeah, I mean, it plays out almost kind of like a choose your own adventure book.
Yeah, exactly.
Where you kind of go through it at your own pace with your own style and your own thing. I don't think they would ever even be able to make an FF7 remake style game because of all that flexibility and the narrative and the choices.
Yeah, they wouldn't be able to railroad it to make developing a game like that be worth.
And that's like
worth it to them.
It's the true spirit of like the idea of an RPG, like a role-playing game.
Right.
You choose the characters and the roles that you want to play and how you do it. Like it's all you can make it a completely different experience every time you play, whereas almost every other JRPG, even Final Fantasy, it's a lot more scripted. It's a lot more like the character is predefined and you go through the story beats with the specific predefined characters.
And you can deviate here and like back and forth. Like you can make your character do some crazy shit in like Final Fantasy VII, but a lot of the times your character will be your Tifa will probably be pretty similar to somebody else's Tifa.
Yeah, and I mean even the characters that you bring on story beats are always the same.
Yeah, yeah. So,
but
there's value in that too.
There is, and I mean the first half of Final Fantasy VI is like that.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things I learned about the development of 6 is that 6 is split in half between two major segments of the game. There's the world of balance where it's kind of a standard map, standard politics, standard
nice green,
everything.
And blue. Everything's put together.
Yeah, it feels like another Final Fantasy game.
Yeah. Mostly.
And then major events happen, and then you're in the world of ruin, and it's completely different. It's apocalyptic. There's like major nasty shit all
literally
over the place.
Post-apocalyptic. Yeah.
And what I learned is that the world of ruin was actually only added after they realized that they were ahead of schedule.
Oh,
it was only supposed to be the world of balance.
That's crazy.
I know, and they had enough time and enough budget because they were so efficient at developing for the Super Nintendo that they were just like, let's just double the game.
Just make more
make this just like a midway climax, and then let's just add all this extra post. It kind of feels like a post game.
Once you tell me that, it feels that way. That like the event that causes the world of ruin feels like that could have been an end game situation.
Yeah.
But because they had more that they wanted to do with it, then I guess they're like, let's just twist this real quick.
Yeah.
Sorry, motherfucker.
And I mean, it's in the world of ruin, there's still not a ton of story beats between like when it happens and when the end of the game happens in terms of required story beats.
Right.
Every single character has like a backstory side quest arc thing.
They have their own arcs, and it's
in the world of ruin.
That's where like a lot of emergent gameplay comes from. Like, getting the characters out of order, figuring out where they are in the first place.
Right.
There's like new mini games and shit. That
it's like a completely different world map.
Yeah.
A lot of the towns are named the same, but they're like completely different locations,
different places. Yeah.
Different music, and like you start the world of ruin with yet another completely different main character than you had ever done in the world of balance.
Right.
And then you go back and you have the option of finding all of the characters that you had accrued in the world of balance.
Yeah, as many of them as you want. You don't need to get everything.
That's right. I think it forces you to get 3.
Yeah,
characters.
you have to get enough to split them up for a bit at the end.
Yeah. Because in the final dungeon, you do yet another party split because the game really thrives on kind of like showing off its capabilities through that system.
Showing that off and forcing you to adapt to what kind of mess you may have made with these. Like if you have an underlevel character, oops,
you have to treat each character. Yeah, you have to treat each character like with care.
Yeah.
So I really like Final Fantasy VI. I think it deserves all the acclaim that a lot of people will say is, one of, if not the best Final Fantasy. It's still worth playing. Again, Pixel Remaster is killer. It's a very good fucking thing.
Yeah.
With all the codes that it gives you like they don't even really feel like cheat codes the way they implement it. You can turn off encounters.
Oh yeah.
You can increase experience, gil, and AP especially, which is nice for just like mastering spells quickly and moving on. But there isn't anything like, oh, you have max health. Oh, you have max limit break. Like there's nothing quite so intense.
Game undoing. I guess.
Game undoing.
Yeah.
It's a lot of it is just to kind of accelerate any sort of that preparation phase that can take longer.
Which is honestly completely fair. I think to really get the excuse me, holy shit. To really get the experience of an RPG, I think you really need to play it.
Yeah.
Like you need to play it as it was designed or computer RPG, I should say. You need to play it as designed and not use any of the skips, but having the option to do so you can just at least experience something of it, because you don't know how much time you have left in this fucking planet.
I will say Final Fantasy VII has stretches where I was like, I don't know if in 2024 I would want to sit through like the over and over random battles at 1x speed. Like in Corel, when you're going across the train tracks, there's a lot of just, you're going across the train tracks and you're going to get into a random battle. And I don't really need this experience to move on because I know how to play the game.
Yeah. See, I find the combat in Final Fantasy VII fun. I can't remember how I felt about the random stuff in when I played it during the unemployment period, where I just kind of blasted through it. But
in 7?
Yeah. I don't remember feeling like the game was dragging.
I don't think it does. I mean, I think it's intentional in terms of how it's paced. Of where you're going to find the most random battles.
Yeah. I mean, I even dealt with the Tonberries to get the fucking ribbons for everybody.
It's funny.
So it's just like, let's just fucking do this. I
think the one part where it's helpful in modern day is that like if you want to just explore the map and not feel like the risk of running into random battles, just so you can kind of see what's over there. Like, is this something I can even interact with?
Get to a point. So and like, I know a lot of people I know even will have trouble with getting distracted on a world map like that and then forget what they were doing. It's not like on a PS1 game you could mark. Right. You could put waypoints down like you could in like Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom or something.
Man, half the PS1 JRPGs, even Super Nintendo RPGs, like you kind of almost needed a guide to get through some of the
sometimes,
points.
Yeah. If you didn't know the language that this game was trying to speak to you with, I mean, like with the
design
game
language.
Yeah. Nowadays, I can figure it out from having experienced a lot of games, but back then you kind of just going, which is probably intentional. They want you kind of in these games as long as they could keep you there.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like having a guide on a lot of those games was very helpful. And nowadays the guides are just built into the game, so who knows?
Yeah. So 6 rules, complete package, and it was making me think about how, we have a friend playing through Final Fantasy 16 for the first time, and I just finished Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and I really feel like across those 3 games, you kind of get the full pantheon of what Final Fantasy has to offer.
Yeah.
It's like if you think of Final Fantasy as any particular Final Fantasy game as like some kind of point on that triangle, where what 6 did really well was, I guess it's probably like perfectly in the middle in terms of like balancing things from narrative to story to music to pacing and everything in between. On the other side, you have Final Fantasy 16, which I think had all of the bombasticness and storytelling and narrative.
Final Fantasy 16 had the spectacle in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
And then they from my understanding at least, the people were looking for Final Fantasy to go back to the driest medieval fantasy kind of stuff too for a while.
Very distilled.
Yeah.
I still think one of the biggest things missing in Final Fantasy 16 was like the weirdness.
Yeah.
There's like weirdness in every Final Fantasy game except 16. 16 doesn't really have it. It's very serious.
Yeah. I mean,
very like almost like realistic, except for the icons.
It tries to be as grounded as a Final Fantasy game can be. But
it's the Game of Thrones influence, probably.
Yeah.
But then you got Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which also huge spectacle. It takes every story beat, every element of Final Fantasy VII, and ratchets up the core, the emotional core of every story beat and every musical theme and every gameplay element, and brings it to 11.
Yeah, it even tries to do that with the goofy shit.
Even with the goofy shit.
Yeah, the goofy shit is still there, which is important.
It's maximum Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
Like there's maximum weird shit, maximum mini games.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't like it. A lot of people don't realize it. I'm getting down a rabbit hole in Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth, and that's, I guess we're transitioning now over to that because I just beat it and I just need to talk about it.
Get some stuff out. Yeah.
People complain about A, the number of mini games, B, the pacing, C, the Ubisoft game world design, or D, the oversaturation, the overstimulation, the overdoneness of each of the story segments. Like, I just wish it was a little more subdued, a little bit more nuanced, a little bit more like the original. And it always kind of like irks me because, again, what we talked about here, even just at the beginning today, like what they did, they probably went as insane as they could with this technology and with the graphics and with the sound that they had the experience for. I'm sure that if they wanted to do something in modern day, this is exactly what they did. Like, they truly captured what they wanted people to feel with Final Fantasy VII, and I can 100% say that I felt that actually.
Yeah, I mean, every time you'd bring it up in the chat, you were like, "Oh,
it is good shit."
It's this thing, my man.
I think if you're bothered by Final Fantasy VII because of its over the topness, you're genuinely just like.
Are you talking about the original 7, or are you talking about?
No, with the Rebirth.
With the Rebirth, I think, and I think the. One of the things about the remake trilogy, I'll say, because we don't have a third game yet. I think the thing about them is to make people who played the games in the past, make them feel the way about the game that they did when they were kids.
And they do that.
Yeah,
they exactly do that.
Yeah,
like it's literally down to the flaws. Like there's things that like you kind of scratch your head about, even just in the original game. You're like, how does this work? Like I don't really understand the mechanics, but I guess I'm along for the ride. Game, the rules of the universe and what's happening. But I'm along for the ride, and it's like that, but to 11.
They just say fuck it.
Like the confusion and like insanity goes to 11. The sorrow and tragedy and like ironicness, like dramatic irony of like the events that are happening. Like even knowing the events of the original game, like all of that, especially knowing, like I fully believe now, having played Rebirth, I know they said with remake, like, we want people to be able to enjoy this if you've played the original or not. Yeah. I 100% with confidence say, like, you have to have played the original to fully understand and experience.
It is one of those things where I do, like, when people ask about it, I had someone ask me about it earlier, and because they just got a PS5 recently, and they still thought the game was turn-based, especially. I was like, game's not turn-based. What are you talking about? It's got like menus, but it's not turn-based. But they also asked if they needed to if they could just play this and not worry about the original. I was like, you can, but I think you'd be better off eventually playing Final Fantasy VII, even if it's after remake, even if it's like either before or after. It doesn't really matter. I think you should just play Final Fantasy VII normally to experience it the way it was. So that when you think about remake and rebirth and whatever the last game ends up being called, you kind of get that these games are also a celebration of the like flash, like thunder and lightning in a bottle situation that 7 was, and how they're not really trying to recapture it, but they're trying to reestablish the feelings that were evoked by it.
That's exactly what they do. Here's some more things that I can confidently say about Rebirth that made me just very, very happy.
Yeah.
They absolutely recaptured the emotional core of each moment and each thing. It's like when you think about how you felt playing through a particular segment, that will be recaptured and like amplified playing through the game, which is tight. Yeah. I will say there were 2 places when the game did drag.
Yeah, okay.
But again, compared to remake, it's way less than remake was. Because I think with remake, it didn't quite get that feeling. Like I played through remake and I was like, oh, I recognize all these areas. Oh, I recognize the things, and that it's like kind of redoing things in a different way. Remake felt more like a different game from original than Rebirth did.
Remake is so obviously an introduction.
Yeah.
Like to the point where it seems like it's kind of giving you the Disneyland walkthrough.
Yeah.
Before they let you just go in the park.
Right.
Kind of thing. I've never been to fucking Disneyland or Disney World, so I don't know if there's some kind of
You've never been to any Disney
I've never been
property?
to Disney anything.
I think it's worth going.
Well, even as a fucking 30-something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe if I no, these kids ain't fucking happening. Sorry, I don't fucking need this shit.
Kurt and I went just us two to the Star Wars area, and it was sick.
Well,
they have a bar. They have like one of the cantinas, and it's literally just a bar. You can go drink at it.
Is there some? Yeah.
They have little like mechanical creatures that will play that. We were in there at like 10 a.m. because we couldn't get tickets and we were just ripping shots.
You needed just oh my fucking god!
But it was still packed because it's like Disney World, so it's always packed.
It's fucking Disney World, so
it was tight though.
Yeah,
it was fun.
One day I'll find a way to get there.
No, but I think the Disneyland thing is apt because I actually see that as a complaint a lot. It's like, it's the Disneyland version of Final Fantasy VII.
I see that as a complaint about a lot of games too, which I think is
that is
ridiculous.
Final Fantasy. They're the Disneyland versions of JRPGs. Like that's the whole core of the franchise. If you don't like that, go play Dragon Quest. That's why Dragon Quest exists under the same company
it's under the
umbrella.
Same umbrella at this point. Yeah,
that's what they do. They get the little bit more like down to earth, a little bit more grounded stories. They still get kind of crazy, even with 11, in ways that I particularly enjoy. But like the Dragon Quest franchise is about just iterating on a tried and true formula.
Yes, it's absolutely
and keeping exactly the same vibes, aesthetics, and semblances. Final Fantasy has always been about going above and beyond, pushing the technological envelope, pushing the insanity, making people feel like they're insane and crazy. And it's like, holy shit, what am I looking at? Like, am I on acid, like going through these things?
That's one of those things. It's, you know how people say, oh, it's just about the vibes. Sometimes, for real, a lot of these stories, especially stories written in the East, actually, but a lot of these games are not about making sense. They're about evoking a feeling. Yeah. And a lot of the times these games will just be about evoking a feeling.
I saw a lot of complaints about the final Miyazaki movie for that exact reason.
Oh, yeah. It's
Boy and the Heron.
Yeah.
Because it's like just a weird movie, but it makes you feel a specific way, and that's his whole point of it.
I'm not going to tell you how to enjoy your media, but a lot of people, we've mentioned this before, will come at stuff like this like it's a product. And a lot of educated people, I should say, don't know how to turn parts of their brain off that are trying to over-critique something. Yeah. It's like, it really does not need to make logical sense. It doesn't need to make sense to you. Part of the experience is that it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, you got to just let go.
Yeah, it's an expression. People
and I'm glad you brought that up.
In ways that don't make sense.
I'm glad you brought that up because the whole thing about product versus art, like this is 100% a creator's art piece through and through, from the gameplay design to the music. Holy shit, I can't say enough good things about the music, the combination of motifs in one particular like piece of music. One track will go across multiple characters. It's insane. I can't wait for the soundtrack to drop in a week. Yeah. But it's just like Rebirth is so true to the original game in every way. Like I can't even. I'm so annoyed because like there's things I didn't want to talk about that I know would spoil, but I know I can't. Yeah. But just like even the progression of the game, that sense of like continued increased scale as you go through the game and unlock more ways of moving around. Like they replicate all of those types of feeling and those senses of wonder and awe. Yeah. Like as you go through the game, and by the end of the game, you're like, holy shit, like this is a big fucking world, and I see how it all connects, and like, oh God, it's so good. Like you don't realize that they're recapturing these feelings until you're feeling it. Like
until you're
that's
in it.
The kind of thing. Like logically what story beats are coming up, but you don't appreciate until you're like in the middle of it and experiencing it. Just how like truly they're actually like coming back, and like it's almost like a form of enhanced deja vu. I was going to say
it's like somebody asked me if I would ever go back in time for anything. And my answer was like, I'd go back to visit and see how my memories stack up to the reality of it. Yeah. And these remake games are like maybe the last time we'll get something like this for Final Fantasy VII specifically. And what it is making sure that
honestly, it's rare.
They need to meet your memories of that past. You obviously can't go back to it, but moving forward, you're re-experiencing some of these things in a new way. And it's divorced from the way you believed you experienced them in the first original case. So you're getting these things again in a way that's like a re-expression and, like I said, like a celebration of what used to be.
I'll honestly go out and say that it's probably unlikely that we'll see anything like that ever again, just because of like the unique nature of what we're dealing with, right? We're talking about a piece of media that came out and was land breaking in our lifetime that we remember coming out and playing as kids.
Yeah.
Now the same creators have been able to come back. The same team of people came back to do it again for a modern generation, modern times, and like basically reassert their vision and saying like, this is genuinely how we wanted people to experience it. Now that we have modern technology, like video games are one of the only things that can even really do that, where it's like you're limited by the technology, which then also ends up probably adding to some of the design informing some of their design in the first place. So it's like a really unique situation where the limitations of the time and the people and the product and everything that went into making it, like, and then being able to do it again 30 years later, 20 years later.
25 years
25 years later.
The unique thing about video games, like you're saying, like that, the technology was changing really fast for a while. So 20 years is a pretty fucking long time for games as a medium. Like books, not necessarily, because 20 years later, of course, things change, but that book is still perfectly readable the same way. You don't need to remake a fucking book. That's right. Sense.
It's the same medium.
Yeah. But in this particular case, it's the time is short enough that you, like you said, you have the original developers on it. And we're getting to the point where some of these developers of these older games are getting old, and they're passing away.
They are old. They're like in their 70s or late 60s.
Like some of them are that old. So you don't know when
Akira Toriyama was in his late 60s. We can never get Chrono Trigger the same way that we got Final Fantasy VII
exactly.
remake.
It's impossible now. You have new developers coming up that didn't have to experience. Well, okay, let me back up. Some of them probably have a certain experience with limitations, but not all of them have had to experience the limitations of the past and what that means for the product. You know, the works of the present.
Yeah.
So you don't like some techniques that were built up over years are kind of just being handed down to newer developers rather than being the same things that have been developed over years. And in some cases, that's great because you get new people with new ideas, new ways, new techniques to do things. But on the other hand, we're going to start losing those older philosophies, and we're going to get like a facsimile of them.
Yeah.
Based on
and that's another key point is that I think a lot of remakes in the game world specifically are really just retreading the same ground. And it's not really necessarily amplifying or improving the experience. It's just a fresh coat of paint. Whereas with remake, it's like everything is done. Like it's wild that you get what is otherwise a completely different game. But it gives you the same feelings. Like it's really wild to have something like that.
On that point that you were making, like of Rebirth and remake being, really about
recapturing
it. The RE remakes are interesting, in my opinion, for a different reason. Like, the Resident Evil 2 remake was bringing it up to a modern standards of playability, where, over-the-shoulder camera, different, the environments are made so you can navigate them, so you're closer to them and you don't have the awkward controls of the fixed perspective and all of that. And I think that changes the game a lot. And RE2 remake is not the same game at all as the original game, despite having similar story beats and similar gameplay and similar things like that in certain places. And I think those two games exist independently, but it's not like the remake of RE2 is trying to treat itself as a sequel to the original game or something. It's narratively, canonically, it's a replacement.
Yeah.
And that makes me want them to release the original games in a modern format so that people can play those and get how it was, because they're just not the same, and they don't evoke the same feelings. RE3, people don't even like the RE3 remake because they kind of rushed it along. And then the Resident Evil 4 remake got announced, and a lot of people, including me, were like, does this game really need it? They re-release this game all the time, and it was made, it's 20 years old now, or it's 19 years old now, but it's modern enough that it's not like you can really do much to it to bring it up to a modern standard other than make the graphics look better. So when they did remake it, they did so with they made a different game, and that different game removed some of the goofy shit, and it's almost like I really like the RE4 remake. Don't get me wrong, but it misses what that original game was really all about, which was very arcadey gameplay and very almost it's a pastiche of the genre that it's a part of. And the remake tried to make it a horror game properly.
So it almost like didn't get it.
It was made by different people because Shinji Mikami hasn't worked for Capcom in a long
and those are important points. Now. A lot of these remakes that we get, the vast majority of them are not, when they're not the same game, it's because A, it's not the same people working on them.
Right.
Or B, because they just don't even try to capture the same emotional core and they're just trying to modernize.
Yeah.
And like it's truly treating them as products, right? It's
in a lot of cases,
reshaping, reformatting them. It's like when they take, the Model S and they remake it in 2024 as a new car. It's like, hey, look, it's the Model S. Like you can go and feel like you're getting the first of a new generation.
Yeah.
But it's like it's a shadow of what people probably felt when the Model S first came out.
Yeah. And even like that fucking remake even has the gall to say play on a hardcore if you've played Resident Evil 4 2005. It's like it's such a bad recommendation because the game is so much harder for a lot of reasons that have nothing to do with the original. Well, have some stuff to do with the original game, but have nothing to do with the reason why the original game could have been difficult, including that game's dynamic difficulty. That game changes difficulty based on how you're doing, on the normal difficulty at least. And this particular game has more random elements, which is cool from a horror game perspective. Great, but when the game's so focused around combat, you want things to be consistent so that you can properly plan what how you're going to go about these encounters. So in the original RE4, you spend more time actually fighting the enemies because you can be sure when you shoot them in the face, you can kick them. And then that kick gives you invincibility, and that roundhouse knocks out all the enemies around you. In this game, you can't be 100% sure if that headshot, that face shot that you do on an enemy is going to actually stun them in a way that you can get the roundhouse. And even when you do get those melee attempts, you don't get enough invincibility, so you can get grabbed right after them or grabbed not during them, but you can get hit while you're trying to wind up for it. And that changes the game for people who play the shit out of the original game like I did, but not in a way that's like cool necessarily. It's more in a way that's kind of uncomfortable. It's like they really didn't want to just repeat the same old thing, and they didn't have to. But at that point, you can make a different game. You didn't have to call it RE4. It didn't have to be an RE4 remake. I appreciate the RE4 remake as a different game, but in trying to use it to replace the original game canonically, that doesn't make any sense. Because the original game is very special and unique for what it is. And this game is a little bit more homogenized with the other two remakes they made.
Yeah.
So it's just like, damn, it's a good game, but it's missed the point.
Yeah.
And I feel like Rebirth, remake and Rebirth, Final Fantasy VII remake and Rebirth, both have figured out that
it's very much the opposite. They absolutely are driving home the point, whether you're gonna like it or not.
Yeah, but even
they are unabashedly staying true to their artistic vision.
They're staying true to their vision, but the funny part is that they, there's narrative hooks in there that tell you this isn't a replacement.
Right.
Like don't try to replace this. This is supplementary to the experience you had with the other game.
Yep.
So you don't lose anything, and it's much easier to accept once you understand that it, remake means something different than what it means for a lot of other.
Which again is like they're winking at the name remake.
Yeah. They're doing Final Fantasy shit by just being like, yep.
Yeah, the whole Tetsuya Nomura naming convention. Yeah,
it's almost like Kingdom Hearts level shit. They could have called it RE.
Which is funny because people keep clowning on it for having too much Kingdom Hearts whatever in it, when the reality is he's the one that's like, no, we probably shouldn't do much of this whatever, like multi-timeline, multi-versal, nobody really knows what's happening right now.
It's still not clear. Yeah.
I actually don't think it's actually doing any of that. I think it's just a lot of mindfuckery, but we'll see.
We'll see. Yeah. It's probably intentional.
Yeah.
It's
100%
completely intentionally stirring.
I want to say one of my favorite things about it, though, especially Rebirth.
Yeah.
I was really worried, considering one of the things they said before Remake even came out, that they were going to use this as an opportunity to take everything from original Final Fantasy VII and all of the compilation and consolidate it into one game.
One series of games, yeah.
I can fortunately say that has not really happened.
Yeah.
In the sense that, like, there are characters that show up.
That's what I was going to say.
But it's more of like if you know, you know, and not like, oh, they're now essential as part of the story.
Yeah.
There actually is one character from the relatively recent Ever Crisis / First Soldier who's like in the main story.
Yeah.
But again, it doesn't seem like we don't know what the deal is yet. It's going to be something in the third part.
Oh, okay.
But there are a couple other characters that, again, are just kind of like, oh, this is sort of like your place in the world now, and it's different from what it was in the compilation, and also it's not like changing fundamentally what the story beats were in the emotional core, which I was really worried about, having replayed Crisis Core recently and realizing how much it kind of like steps on a lot of the original story beats and kind of fucks up the original story a lot.
Yeah, you were really upset when you played Crisis Core again.
Man, when people tell me, if I see online people say how much they liked Crisis Core and how much they dislike Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, I might scream, because like that's got to be one of the most insane takes I've ever heard in my life. I don't know if there's anybody out there like that, to be honest.
I don't think there's anyone that says one and then says the other as well. Yeah, I think there's one that there are people that don't like.
Man, I will say
Crisis Core. The reason also like
the reason why this game specifically I was worried is because there's events in Crisis Core that completely change the events of what actually happened in events that happened in Rebirth. And so when I got to these events in Rebirth, I was like almost hesitant, like what's gonna happen?
Yeah.
But it was, again, very true to the original. So I was like, hell yeah, this is tight.
They probably, I don't know if they've gotten credit or not. There's a tree moving, or there's like a tree moving around outside and scared the shit out of me. It makes it waving black now. I think these games aren't getting, maybe they are, because I haven't looked at the discourse about them very much, but the remake games being a little different than the way the original games were in certain ways, I think is very clever, because that's kind of how Cloud exists in this world.
That's
anyway. That's
exactly what's happening.
Yeah, making you think you have the false memories.
So that's one thing that, again, like thinking about what is the core of this game and how they have to tell it differently based on the way the game plays and works.
Yeah.
They do that intentionally, and they change the way that some of the story beats are framed.
Yeah.
To make it seem like to lean on the fact that Cloud in the original game is an unreliable narrator.
Yeah, yeah.
Which in the original game, just from the camera angles and the way you play it and the way that it works, like you're more of like an outside observer of the events of the game. Now you are in Cloud's POV.
Yeah.
Like you are squarely in his point of view. Yeah. There are times when they like hint at things that aren't in his point of view, and they make that, there's like, I think they make that kind of obvious. But they're very clever in the way that they do it.
You went from being the kid playing with the toys to like being a kid, not fully understanding what kind of things that he went through. Kind of like the way a kid looks at their parents, I guess.
Yeah.
To being the parent.
Right.
To being like, oh, this is the fucked up shit that this world has in store for me, and I can't rein it in. It's just going to do whatever it does, you know. I was going to say something, I lost it.
One thing that I saw, you talked about the discourse.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if it was just the people that had like stopped playing or given up playing, or the people that are chronically online, but for whatever reason, the discourse over the first couple weeks was just like very frustrating.
Yeah.
Because I would see people that would comment things like, oh, this game is so bombastic, it's so over the top, I hate all the things I listed that people hate about it, right? They'd list all those things, they'd be like, but it's not as bad as Final Fantasy 16. That was a 2 out of 10. Remake was a 4 out of 10, and maybe Rebirth is a 5 out of 10. It's like, dog, you just spent like 400 hours on games that you hate.
Don't like?
Like, what's going on here? Like, I think
one time, sure, but over and over.
Yeah, like Pedro made a good point that like I think a lot of people, especially nowadays online, like complaining online is almost like their form of social interaction and engagement.
Yep. Yeah.
And it's not even so much that like they hate the games. It's just that it's so easy to be a hater and to be toxic than it is to like think critically.
It is way easier to just straight up dislike or, present your dislike for something in the most obnoxious way you can get away with, rather than to consider the goods and the bads and maybe appreciate the opinions around you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because a lot of these people want to say, "Hey, you're wrong," but nobody's really. Even when we in here say like someone's wrong about something, they're not necessarily wrong. Maybe just their presentation of their opinion is wrong. But yeah,
I think my favorite complaint though is I see this one very frequently where people say, "What's wrong with this dev team?"
Oh,
and they're like, "Why couldn't they just do X, Y, Z?" And it's just like, honestly, it's they're doing their bit. Like, this is truly them unencumbered by like the corporations that be. Like, if this ain't what you like, then I think you probably need to reevaluate what you liked about Final Fantasy VII in the first place.
Yeah, and like I dislike when people say, "Why didn't they just do this?" Because a lot of the times the devs, game developers specifically, have already gone through that that thought. Like, why can't we do this? And there's a reason why they can't. And it's not even just games; it's movies and anything too. Anything that you consume for entertainment, if there's something in that story or in that presentation or in that game that you think they should have done, somebody probably already thought of it and decided it actually was not good for the end product.
Yeah, for whatever it was, for whatever reason that they decided was better to do it a different way. But
that's a lot, dog.
I know.
I'm not going to say it in the mic, but that's a lot.
It's unfortunate.
Am I stepping on? Yeah. We'll figure this out.
So yeah, that's kind of all I have to say now about Final Fantasy. Okay. I'm excited to see where the series continues to go.
Yeah.
When 17 comes out, I'm curious to know if 14 ever ends.
Yeah.
I think it's funny because 16 was so clearly the opposite reaction to 15, where they wanted a game that was like streamlined, serious, and just they wanted to get it out. After the development unfinished product that 15 was.
Yeah.
Development hell, unfinished, multimedia spanning.
Right.
Just a kind of a disaster on all fronts. It's okay to like Final Fantasy 15 for what it was and for what it brought to the table, but 16 was a response to that.
Yeah.
And now that people have responded to 16, I imagine 17 will fall somewhere back in the middle. I think honestly 12 is probably...
I was going to say fucking 12 too.
Something like 12. I think 12 is probably the last true mainline Final Fantasy that I think really nailed it. I think all of the ones after 12 have a lot more complaints. Like the ratio of complaints to things that were good about it are like more skewed. I think 12 is generally much more positive and consistent with like the franchise brand.
Like I know there's people that find 12 to be boring as fuck, but I also 12 is like probably the most normal ass game that does something different with the gameplay.
And it's funny because 12 is basically a Xenoblade game.
Yeah.
And honestly, Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth reminds me a lot of how Xenoblade games are designed from the map perspective.
I was going to say, even I tried classic
map
mode.
And quest. Yeah.
I tried classic mode in those, and those I wanted them to play like Xenoblade. They don't quite.
No, they don't.
But it's a little closer than you think, and that pseudo MMO gameplay is probably the way forward.
Yeah.
For a lot of these, a lot of these RPGs, like it's not quite turn based, but it's
never going to be turn based,
action based either.
It's never going to be turn based ever again. That's what Dragon Quest is for.
I think. Well, even then, I think Dragon Quest 12 could probably play a little bit that way. They already kind of fucked with it with the camera in Final Fantasy, not Final
Dragon Quest 12.
Dragon Quest 11. 11, yeah, like the dynamic camera or whatever they called it.
Yeah.
It moves around and looks like it's going to be like that, but it really is just turn-based.
I think people will freak out if Dragon Quest 12 is ever not turn-based.
Yeah, I mean, I won't. I want them to just do whatever they want. 11 was so good.
11 was so good.
I can always go back to that if I want that traditional turn-based stuff. But, okay. Higher fans, I'm going to keep it simple because I didn't really look all the way into it, but
you did your homework.
There's a bunch of people trying to create a situation where killing online games killing server-based or online or game as a service games, where it becomes almost against the law to do so. And that is almost fucking insane to me.
Wait. Talk me through that.
Okay.
People want to make it illegal to turn off live service games?
Yes.
What is their justification?
I can't figure it out yet. I need to watch. There's like a half an hour long video.
I'm really into that. What's the video called?
I don't remember off the top
recommend it to people.
Let me see. I need to.
That's
because they might make
really
some good
funny
points
to
in
me.
it. Let me see it. I had to look at that fucking.
I mean, to be fair, there's probably some shit that's kind of fucked up about getting people to sync like microtransactions or like payments like that into a service that is only just going to get like destroyed.
The video is called "The Largest Campaign Ever to Stop Publishers Destroying Games."
That's kind of a long title.
Yeah, I'll just send you the link.
Yeah.
But I think there's a little bit of a, everyone. There's a lot of people out there that are about game preservation, sure, and I totally get it. I totally understand it. But I think it's unrealistic to believe that these games can last as an online situation forever. And I think some of the argument is like, publish the source code so people can make their own servers, which I don't disagree with. At the same time, if these developers decide they want, or publishers, developers, whoever, decide that they need to just let this go, sometimes an event is something you miss. That's it.
Right.
And being able to be okay with missing it is going to benefit you more in the long run than trying to hold on to it forever. Like a lot of people are upset about the crew being. Was it the crew?
There's something called the crew in here. Is that a game?
Oh, okay. It must be the racing game, the driving game.
Yeah, the game, the crew.
Yeah, it's like.
I mean, I will say I'm impressed and glad that they at least have like an agenda in mind, where most of these things don't really have an agenda. Right. They're kind of ambiguous.
A lot of them don't have
they want something and they don't know how to turn that into a plan of action.
Yeah. They don't know how to even present it as a thing that makes sense to
so we can go watch this.
Other people.
We can go watch this.
Yeah, sure. All right.
Cool. All right. Well, I'm not going to hire them until I watch the video.
Yeah. In general, at least until I watch the entire thing, I'm going to sit here and say, I appreciate what they're thinking, but the solution is more of, in my opinion, is to, once you recognize that these types of games are a possibility, come to terms with the fact that everything breaks, everything dies, everything goes, even if someone else is the one that's causing it to happen, and decide if you really want to buy into something like that at the outset, or if you can deal with just never experiencing it at all, because you're not going to be able to have every experience, and not everybody.
Does this mean I should petition to sue G4 TV for getting rid of all of its Cinematech episodes?
Yes, absolutely. No, you should sue them for a lot of other shit, even though you didn't work for them. No, like the Cinematech episodes would be great to have to just experience, but at the same time,
it's
people
in the past.
Will be able to survive without it.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's just one of those things.
A bunch of film stock from Paramount was burned in a fire, and there's nothing they can do with it. So there's just lost movies out there.
Yeah, you just have to
decades and decades of movies that were produced and spent hard at work, and
you have
no longer existing.
I think that fact makes the stuff that we do have a little bit more precious than if we just had everything in perpetuity. So, all right,
good shit.
Yep, there we go.
Well, if you like this, go ahead and give us a like, comment, subscribe. Send us an email at memoryleakpodcast@gmail.com. We're on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, and YouTube. And yeah, take us with you. Listen to us on the road. And until next time, peace out.
Peace out. Bye. All right.